It's the news you need to know. At least that's what the media would have you believe. We, on the other hand, would like you to know a little bit more about life, the universe, and everything, and try and give you some, practical ideas and understanding of how Magna Carta 1215 and common law might be able to help you out today in your current situation. Joining me, the expert in all things Magna Carta 1215, particularly Article 61, is Fitzroy I. Fitz, thanks for coming back on and having another chat. I've got a friend of mine who's experiencing a bit of a problem with work at the moment. This person runs or is a manager of a business that's involved in providing services through the NDIS, amongst other things, but to disability support services, essentially. They are not a vaccinated person, and obviously working in that area, the government, state government, have mandated that they must be vaccinated. It looks at this point in time like some options. She's on holidays. Some options might have to be taken to either work from a different facility that the business owns, but they would wind up losing some revenue from that, or potentially working from home. That is still to be decided. Otherwise, this person has been warned that really the only other alternative is termination. Now, not the first person to have experienced this due to what's been mandated by government all around Australia. There are many people in the same predicament. Now, is there anything that we can offer people by way of advice or particularly practical solutions if they're facing this kind of problem?
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. So that's what the Magna Carta was enshrined for. So we never need to face any situation like this ever. And I love how you've left the sovereignty slide up, because that's pretty much at the centerpiece of it all, because that's what the Magna Carta enshrined. It acknowledges and recognizes that we are all supreme and that there's no one that can rule above us, that we are all self-governing. And so it's put together a protection mechanism by which that can happen. And very few people know that the Magna Carta 1215 is the actual constitution for the entire Commonwealth realm, of which Australia is a part. That 1901 Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act is not our constitution. That's a treasonous document that usurps the people's sovereignty. So that's an actual war crime of treason that was committed when that was made. I won't go into that too much because I want to answer your question. So what your friend can do is actually utilize the Article 61 has been invoked, thankfully. And Article 61 is, there are 63 articles in the Magna Carta, and that's the security clause of the Magna Carta. So what that means is that if the people's sovereignty was ever usurped, there's a way by which the people can peacefully restore their legitimate system of governance. And so what it is there's an oath that you take, and an oath is just really an intention to stand under the law as prescribed inside the Magna Carta. And when I say law, I mean that the customs and traditions that the people were already living by, they just enshrined in this document. So then they could have written, provable evidence that this exists. So then it can't be denied by anybody. So that's what I mean when I say under the law. And so it's not like it's someone else deciding what is law. It's that the people already decided it and they just put it in a document. And they had their representatives do that for them, and they were the barons. And they put together 63 articles, which made the complete Magna Carta. So just to understand what Magna Carta is, it's in the spirit of the language of Latin. When it's translated in the spirit of English, it means Great Charter of Liberties. Even though Magna means great or something large, and Carta is charter, it doesn't actually capture what it was really saying, and that is that it's about your liberties. So it's specifically to do with your liberties. And so it enshrines, it's a document that enshrines something that already exists. It just acknowledges it and makes it immutable. So the oath would be the first thing that she would take, which is just a statement of intention to stand under constitutional law, so that which protects her sovereignty. So she's standing under that, and she's made an actual statement to say that that's the case. And so why you do that is if you ever needed to go into a court, which is, when I say court of law, I mean a trial by jury system, which you can see just here in the center on over to the left, that People's Trinity. That's the trial by jury that I'm speaking about. That they would have proof that her intention was to stand under law. So she now is protected by that constitutional law that was enshrined. And once she does that, then the second part of Article 61 is to collect the evidence, and they are the notices. So there are 5 notices that have been put together that you would serve on anyone who's making unlawful demands. So when I say unlawful, I mean anything that's going to breach your liberties, which are enshrined in that constitution. And everything you just articulated are breaching them beyond belief. And so those notices serve as evidence that your friend now is standing under oath, and they're letting those people know who are now making these demands on her, that are going to be a source of loss and harm if she complies with them. Because if she chooses to get the vaccination and then something happens to her, you know what I mean, where her physical integrity is being violated, that's going to be a source of loss and harm for her, right? So she's trying to protect that.
Sure.
And so this is a way by which she can now prove that she has let someone else know that she's standing under the entire Commonwealth realm's law, that she is now doing her duty as a constitutional subject, as someone who's recognized in the Constitution as having liberties that are enshrined. She's doing a duty to inform those others who seek to take from it where she stands, and that they now need to make a choice of whether they are going to keep prosecuting this act of violation, which is a war crime, to ever usurp anyone's sovereignty and administrate them as your slave. So that's pretty much what's happening in a nutshell when they use these words like mandates and other words like that, these legalese terms that have got nothing to do with law. That's all a mental construct that's been created to control people's way of seeing reality. When they use that, she's letting them know that no, all your contracts have no validity, because for there to be a legal system in place, there needs to be a lawful authority in place. And when Article 61 was invoked, which is the security clause, the monarch, which is just the head of state, which is just an office holder of sovereign, so they're just the holder of the office of sovereign, that's been vacated, right? So when the Article 61 was invoked, that is our way, the people's way of actually removing that office holder of sovereign who has breached the people's sovereignty. So they've broken their job contract, they no longer have a job. And when they've been removed from office, then every single parliament throughout the Commonwealth needs to be dissolved. That is how the Constitution was set up. Because for a parliament to be lawful, there needs to be a lawful office holder of sovereign. And there isn't one. That office got vacated constitutionally. They physically never did it because they're criminals, but constitutionally that's why we have one. There's no reason why we don't have a constitution if we're not actually going to hold to the terms of it. And so they broke from those terms, and now they're acting criminally. And so every single parliament throughout the Commonwealth are just criminal imposters impersonating government. And so all that information is contained in those notices. And so if those people who now are served those notices ignore them, then they are now liable for the war crime of treason, because the Constitution isn't something you can play with, because it's there to uphold that which is most precious and sacred, and that is all of our sovereignty. And if we can't do that, then we're slaves. And I don't believe there's too many people out there who are going to come out and say openly that they are slaves.
Absolutely not.
It's one of those things where it's set up where you cannot sit on the fence. There's no fence to sit on. You're either standing under law or you're rebelling against the law. And those people who are making these demands on your friend, they are rebelling against the law. They are actually acting unlawfully outside the law. They are outlaws. They just most likely don't know it. And so those notices are there to inform them of the actual truth, because they actually have all the evidence in them to actually show them that this is not being made up, that they can look it up themselves, and that now it's their duty that once they're informed to now stand under law too. And if they don't, then they are liable for the consequences of treason. So that's what those notices do. Now, if they choose to ignore that, which they most likely will, or it's hard to know, I've had lots of feedback from people who have had lots of success if they've done it in time. That, you know, when these mask mandates came out and their jobs were threatened if they didn't wear it, I've seen people post information about, as soon as they posted those notices to their superiors, that all went away and they were able to keep their job and not wear a mask.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
So there's plenty of evidence out there that it changes the game once these people are informed of what consequences they're looking at. Once, you know, people's consciousness as a collective lifts and we all can see how we've been administrated as slaves, we start getting our courts back the way that they're supposed to be, and that is run by the people. In that trial by jury system, which we see here under the People's Trinity,
Yep.
Where the government legislation is on trial just as much as any of the accused. And if the accused is deemed innocent, then the government's legislation is annulled by the jury, the very same jury. And then once that's done, any single member of parliament who was responsible for creating the bill that ended up becoming that piece of legislation that was deemed to be unjust by the jury, they can now be privately prosecuted by any member of the public for free. And anyone can come and witness it, because in British constitutional common law, justice must be seen to be done. It's never done behind closed doors. We are all welcome to come witness it. So then we can see its transparency in action. That is our correct constitutional justice system, which we've never had in this country. And so these are all the things that are being like imparted on anyone who receives these notices. Now, the majority of them ignore it because it's too much for them.
Yep.
It's not going to stand once it gets put in front of the jury, because those 5 notices are evidence that they were told about the Constitution and they ignored it. And to do that, minimum, you're looking at sedition, and sedition is denial of the Constitution, and that is full asset stripping and life in prison. Top end is the gallows and full asset stripping. So they've got a choice between one or the other. So that's pretty much what they're facing if they ignore these notices. Because
so essentially, everybody who has a feeling at the moment that we're not being served by government, that we're not being looked after in the appropriate manner, our government are certainly not serving us, and they are running roughshod over us. This is the way to do it. Take the oath, serve the notices. So,
sorry, Carl, keep going.
Yeah, so I was simply going to say we want to make those available to people, but what we might do is a separate video on the oath and those notices. I know that you have already done a how-to on how to fill in certain paperwork if you're going to be submitting stuff, so we might see if we can't do something with that as well.
The more people that do this, the quicker this all goes away. So it's not just about, you know, your friend doing it, but anyone else who's watching this.
That's right. Share this video. If you know somebody in the same position, share this video. There is a way out of it.
Yeah, and it's more powerful the more people that do it, because once these criminals see that the collective consciousness is shifting, that's when they go into panic, because then they've got no power. Because once you understand the true nature of your power and who you really are, and that lands in your body, no one can take that away from you anymore. No matter what tactic they pull out, you'll be able to see straight through it, and you just keep holding that line. And so when people say hold the line, they don't actually define what that line is and how to hold it. So this is what's happening now. This is the actual line, and this is how you hold it, because this is actual undeniable evidence that cannot be refuted, because their job is now, once they receive those notices, their job is to refute that this exists, and they never can. They just can't. It's never happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why it's immutable and it's indefensible, their actions. And so that's how powerful it is. And so that's why I'm imploring people to really look into this, because if you take a legal route, it's never going to bring the actual man or woman who is enforcing these acts of slavery, it's never going to bring them to justice, because the legal system will always prevent that. But this system doesn't. It's actually going to identify those people who use the legal system to enforce slavery and bring them forward in our common law justice system, where you are tried as a man or a woman, not as a legal fiction with any legal protection. It's a massive distinction, and that is how true justice happens.
Fitzroy Sterling, thank you for joining us on the News You Need to Know once again. A very enlightening chat.
Pleasure, my friend.